So welcome to Town Hall 84, everyone. It's Wednesday, April 27th, 2022. Greetings. I am in Orlando, Florida. Just got done with my other host, the always brilliant McLaughlin is out today, so I have replaced him with another always brilliant host, my good friend Glenn Sarvati. Hey, Glenn.
Hey there. It's a very, very busy travel week because I know Mike is at the PSCU member event.
Yeah, there's so many things going on currently. So yep, I just finished, and I'll talk about in the next slide. Let's move to the next slide because it's a good segue. So I just finished the CUNA Council's Human Resources and Operations conference. Just did a speaking engagement there. It was fun. Talked about, kind of HR and technology, and it's always fun to see everyone. It seems like people are kind of getting back out, and I know Craig, our guest, is also talking about he's at NACUSO, or NACUSO as it's often known, over at the Yacht Club, which is just across the lake from where I was. It looks like Disney, despite the pandemic, has had a lot of time to do a lot of stuff just recently, which is kind of fascinating. They really have finished up Disney Springs and a lot of things, but I digress. CUNA. So if it is that you are working at a credit union, there's nothing you can do better than get out there and meet other people from other credit unions. And the best place to do it, in my opinion, is CUNA Councils. There are councils for everything. There's IT, there's HR, there's the lending council, there's the marketing council. There's something for every discipline within the credit union, and it's just a great place to go. I had a really good time speaking to the group this week, and feel very fortunate to get to continue to do that. And I'll talk a little bit about correlation.
Actually, I can throw something in there as well, because I happen to know everyone to tie things in. I think correlation doesn't need much more of an introduction to this crowd. Everybody knows that they are a fast-growing core. And Mike Lawson, once again, in the busy schedule coming up, I do know he is going to be at their user conference, which is coming up in the middle of May. You going there too, John? I think it's like May 18th, 19th, something like that, in San Diego. So
I don't know. I don't make my schedule. I just do what it says. So like it pops up on the phone. If I wake up in the morning and it says go to the airport, I just do that. But I'm not sure.
If it's the middle of May and your calendar pops up and says, hey, it wouldn't be a bad day to go to San Diego, just be aware of the correlations.
Is there ever a bad day to go to San Diego? I mean, to be honest, it's just a great place.
And absolutely. I'm sure we'll get some feedback from Mike Lawson, because he'll be doing CU broadcast from there as well.
Oh, absolutely. And he'll be talking about what's going on with correlation. Great organization. Member Pass, just a quick note about them. I know they're at NACUSO. They're helping with our metaverse concept. I actually did a demonstration of the metaverse on stage here in Orlando. I actually walked them through my meta branch and did that on stage to manage not to fall off the stage with my VR goggles on. So I was pretty proud of that. I think we're going to see a lot more from that, but using the member pass is the fastest way to, and the most secure way to authenticate your members, whether it be through home banking, whether it be the teller line, whether it be through the drive up or anywhere else. So really fantastic platform. And Glenn, I think we both agree that there is no better place to go and discover what's going on with the credit unions than CU Broadcast. And
I know there's going to be a ton of new content coming up too, because not only is Mike at the PSCU conference, as I said, he's going to be a correlation. And I know whenever he's been, kind of slowly but surely, like the rest of us, getting back into the conference world, and that's where he gets a lot of content. So we'll have a lot of new stuff coming out over there.
Yeah, and then Best Innovation Group. That's where Glenn and I do our thing, and we've got the podcast that we've put together and been doing. God, Glenn, I think we seriously did just cross 500 episodes. I'm pretty sure.
I think you're right.
So if you haven't checked that out, you can check that out there. Our Innovation Club. You can check out the work we've been doing for all the folks who have home banking and SDKs and need help with that and designing and building various things. So come check out big-fintech.com. Also the sponsor of this and the organization where, when I got with Mike and said, hey, let's pull this together, that's where it started. So I'm going to throw it over to you, Glenn.
All right.
Let's talk with this guy, this Craig guy who's out at NAQ. So he looks very serious in this picture, by the way.
What an awesome photo. I like that.
I know.
It's
a very serious picture. Yeah.
Yeah. That what that says to me? I do AI and there's nothing you can do about it. That's
I don't think so.
By the way, you could use that on anything. You can say, and there's nothing you can do about it to almost anything anybody asks you. So, but yeah, that's what I see right there. Hey, I'm the CEO of Finalytics.ai and there's nothing you can do about it. That's what that says right there.
That's right. That's exactly the sentiment. I don't understand how that photo ended up in the fix, but I'll introduce
it's a cool photo. I understand. It's awesome. It conveys right now. I'm just, anyways. Awesome.
Well, we've been trying to get Craig on for some time because
yes.
Everything that we're talking about going digital, and as Craig and I were doing a little bit of preparatory conversation, I'm like, man, and I knew John, you were going to be on the road. I'm like, I hope John can get on because so much of this, I love data. Craig's got the data, and it really backs up what John you've been talking about forever in terms of building the muscle memory and the capabilities in your organization to move forward with digital. So, the Digital Maturity Index, which I guess just came out, in the last 4-6 weeks or so, Craig? That's something that you put together.
That's right.
Based on research just in the last, I guess it was gathered during the month of January. And that's what we're here for. And there's a link here on the page, but we'll put it in the chat if anybody wants to cut and paste so you can get a copy of the full report. But with that, Craig, why don't you just we have a couple of slides that we've excerpted, but why don't you just talk a bit about, what the intent was with this and kind of the key findings, and then let's just kind of make it into a roundtable discussion from there.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks you guys for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to share the thinking out. And I'm a big fan of what you guys are doing, so really appreciate the opportunity. In January, we looked around and we thought, we talked to so many credit unions that are all largely trying to solve the same problem, which is how do you transform the way the organization has historically dealt with a member in a branch, but how you bring that kind of secret sauce into the digital channel. And I think if every credit union leadership team had a magic wand, they would just go through and make sure they delivered that same kind of brand experience that they can offer in person or on the phone into the digital channel. But it's really complicated. It's really hard to get right. And as we worked with credit unions kind of across the board, what we found at various asset sizes is that the problems are pretty similar. Is the challenges of transforming credit unions is less about a tool set, and it's more about transformation. And so we created this survey that we drafted based on Forrester's model to analyze digital maturity and sent it out to credit unions. And the respondees ranged kind of across the board. So we had the smallest size was about 133 million. The largest size was about 31 billion in assets. On average, CUs that were over $500,000 represented 87% of the people. You've got kind of generally the people that responded were over $500 million in assets, and even 20% of those were over $5 billion in assets. So it's kind of skewed a little bit on the larger side of credit unions in terms of where they are, which is interesting because you would imagine that those credit unions are more advanced than potentially some of the other credit unions, right? In terms of their ability to be able to go and bring in technical talent. We looked at the organization in 4 areas. So we looked at culture, we looked at organization, we looked at technology, and we looked at data/insights. And y'all excuse me, there's a lot of action here as sessions are ending and people are going to new sessions here at EQSO. So if you hear a little background noise, it's coming from that. But within these 4 areas of focus, the first is culture, which we always think is one of the most critical areas of transformation. credit unions historically have looked at technology as an opportunity to be able to just kind of change very quickly. And it's one thing to go and go shopping for a new product to be able to bring change. It's another thing to change yourself, right? I mean, I could want all day long that I'm 20 pounds lighter, but until I get up every day and begin to execute that transformation, it's really hard to kind of bring that to life. And so culture is a tough one because it's something that's really hard to get right. So within culture, we looked at leadership. We looked at how well communicated the vision is in terms of how they're using digital and the prioritization of the member digital experience. Within the organization, we looked at how does the organization think about digital. So it was less about how does digital happen, and it was more about how does digital happen in harmony and symphony across multiple departments, which I think is one of the biggest challenges as a credit union or any institution wants to take its business from what was traditionally delivered in a brick and mortar capacity and bringing it online. The credit unions traditionally are very much centered in silos, right? So it's really easy for a leadership team to divide the organization into functional areas and then really kind of not have to do a lot of work together, but instead have departments. When you try and bring that model to a digital first model, it's really hard for that to take root because digital basically needs to be the fulcrum or the endpoint for all of those different pieces. So we looked at, is the credit union focused on the member across digital, or are they still just kind of taking those existing silos that are organized in the offline capacity and bringing it to the digital channel, which is, I think it's kind of a more immature approach to being able to do that. We asked about the level of the most appropriate technology inside the institution to understand were they in a position to be able to bring the right technologies to bear. So was it kind of a modern tech infrastructure? Was it focused around the member journey? And was the member journey driving the technology, or was the technology driving the member journey? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And then we also, can you guys hear me okay? Is there any some background noise okay?
There's some background noise, but we can hear you. Okay.
And then the other bit was then insights and data, which for us is like we feel like the data is the holy grail, right? Because you can have all the best ideas in the world in terms of how you want members to engage with you, and you can put all this great infrastructure in place. And the success of that journey is dependent on data. Now, I always think of data is that you took your best credit union CEO and you put him into a branch. That person could sit there and look around and determine how the branch was performing pretty intuitively. They could determine how many people were in line, how long they waited, how happy did they look when they were done that experience. Ultimately, then inform the quality of that experience. In the digital world, data really represents that as the opportunity. So we're digging into in this report, are there clear and quantifiable goals? Is the data driving the outcome? And then ultimately, are member insights driving the digital experience? So what we learn about how a member is engaging with us, are we listening to that? And are we taking those insights back to inform how the organization is adjusting to this new digital world? So in terms of the high level results, what we found is about 84% said their competitive strategy hinged on getting digital right, which is interesting. So 16% of credit unions said digital is not critical to our competitive strategy, which is interesting. I mean, you have to have a really clear business model that isn't influenced by digital to say.
You still there, Glenn?
I'm here. Are you getting Craig, or did Craig break up on you?
I think Craig broke up on us.
Okay.
So
one of the things, I don't know, Craig, if you can hear us, but it looks like you may be back.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you froze there for a minute. One of the things I'm curious about, the fact that organization, I mean, everything else is hovering right around the 50% level. Organization is significantly lower. Do you think that Does that have to be fixed before you can make meaningful progress on the others, or is it a matter of moving them all at the same time? I think Craig may have frozen again.
I want to comment. Well, I'll fill in here a bit because you're right. I mean, I look at this maturity index that's very much aligned with my thinking, which is culture is a really important part of it. One of my little sayings is you can't product your way out of this, Oh, yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead, Kevin. Or Craig, sorry. Craig, you there?
He froze again.
I'm cutting in and out, guys. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wonder maybe.
Can you hear me?
Right now we can hear you. Yeah, I wonder if maybe if you can move someplace. I don't know.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. Why don't I do that? Why don't I move really quick and I'll pop back on.
That'd be great.
Okay.
Thanks.
So while he does that, I'll speak to that. I love this maturity index. I like this maturity index concept, because it really is a way to quantify a lot of different things in the space. And it was fascinating to me that what he just said, where there are some organizations that go, well, digital isn't really part of our strategy. And in some ways I resonate with that if they're saying it in the sense that digital is not separate of our business. It just is our business. It's who we are. It's not it's the business plan is the technology plan is the digital plan. So if that's the sentiment, then I resonate with that.
Yeah, it's interesting. On one level, 84% saying yes, it's important is a pretty overwhelming number. So that's good. 16% saying no, 1 out of 6 is still somewhat surprising. I could picture if you had hyper tiny credit unions where it might not really be a realistic part of their strategy. But Craig, as you said, the smallest one you've got in here is 130 million. So I am surprised that there's anybody who's even saying it's not important.
Yeah, well, I think in that case, you'd have to be the kind of a credit union that had a very, very distinct understanding of what your members needed, and you weren't looking to use digital to be a function of driving your growth. So I think those are the people that I carry. And I've come across some of them that just feel like, hey, look, we know our members really well. And the members that we do have are very comfortable coming into branches, but they're very few and far between. So I would agree with you. It's a strange fit in terms of that 16%.
Is it reasonable to think, I don't know if you know this, but the 16% that said it wasn't important, do they tend to skew on the small side?
No, I don't think. Wow. I don't think so. I think it was kind of a combination of different sizes that was driving some of that. So it was somewhat variable in terms of I can't speak to the data specifically in terms of that question, but it was I don't think that's the answer on that one.
Okay, it was interesting also when we talked about this earlier that segmentation by large versus small credit union doesn't seem to really create a whole lot of differences from what you said. People, there's the thought, okay, you've got more resources if you're large, and therefore you can tackle this problem. But it sounds like from what you're finding, that's not necessarily the case.
What I think is actually happening though is I think it's very relative. So I think that it's all based on perception of your of how you're looking at digital, and I don't think it's I think it's really relative. So, for example, credit unions that we've worked with, some of the largest credit unions with really deep pockets are very clear on where their blind spots are and what they're trying to solve. So when you ask them, do you feel like you've got a level of readiness that's appropriate? They're going to come back and say, no, we have these clear gaps. Whereas a credit union that is maybe smaller and isn't aware of where those bottlenecks are just yet, they're going to answer that, they feel like they have a pretty modern tech stack because they went shopping and they bought a new set of technology that's solving that problem, right? So I think it's relative.
That makes sense. Yeah, I mean, you set yourself to a higher standard. You're playing in a different, with a different peer group. Yeah.
I mean, so we in the work that we do with some of the largest credit unions that are able to have deep pockets of a $30 billion or $15 billion in assets level, they're able to bring in these leadership teams that are like from big mega banks. So like teams from Citibank or teams from tech companies. And they walk in and they're immediately triaging problems, and they're very, very clear in terms of where those problems are. I think when I think of smaller credit unions, they don't know where those blind spots are just yet. So they're still trying to struggle to figure out how to get around that. Being here at CUSO, I kind of get the sense that there's people are still trying to size up the problem and figure out how they're going to solve it. And potentially some of the larger ones have a little bit more clarity in terms of exactly what needs to get addressed and solved.
That makes sense. So it looks like we're on the next. John, did you have anything to add there? It looks like we're on the next slide, which I think you've kind of discussed already, a couple of these, but Kat.
Okay. We got a question from the chat from Kat, but while she does that, or maybe you could take a look at that one and read it out, or we could unmute her. But Craig, real quick on the other thing. So I noted in there that you were also looking for sort of hindrances, things that prevent them from, because there was like a minimum requirement of at least having AI or some plan to get into AI. You mentioned cloud and some of those tools. Did your report uncover any biases around that were sort of, I want to say preventors, or, like Harry Potter dementors or something along those lines, that sort of prevent biases that will prevent credit unions from moving either at the speed they need to, or actually inhibit them from, eventually delivering these without some sort of, it kind of falls into that culture category, but without some sort of thought change.
Yeah, no, we didn't have anything that addressed that specifically. We did associate cloud and AI and machine learning as part of like an advanced infrastructure question, and so those all kind of fit together. What I worry about when I think of that question, though, is, again, it's really relative. So the number of credit unions I've talked to that say, "Hey, we're trying to set our AI strategy," and you say, "Okay, well, so what are you trying to solve?" And they'll come back and they'll say, "Well, we don't know. We just know we need AI." And so, I think it's kind of an example of some of the challenges. Using technology for technology's sake isn't really succeeding, right? It's not digital first, right? But when you're very clear on, hey, we as a team are going to move the needle forward. We want members to feel this way as they navigate us and think of us in a certain way. We want the result of that to be these metrics, and then we can go back and measure those. And I think that's what then also connects to the other issue, which is having it be siloed versus kind of organization-wide.
So do you see a difference between an organization that may say, hey, our ultimate goal with AI is to use it as to broad brush it across the organization as a personalization strategy, to be able to do that sort of in-depth next product needed, and provide sort of the graphics and the experience, as opposed to someone who says, well, our intention with it is to drive cars, to drive auto sales, and our plan is to not to really focus on this personalization, but to really understand what our risk is in that category and how to make more car loans, and ultimately to get more vehicles or more assets in the hands of our members who are maybe currently hindered by the current FICO score or those sorts of things. Is that two different things, or is that one and the same?
I think they're two different things, and I think the guys that, in my experience, the credit unions that win, that excel and bring teams of people together to create improved results, are the ones that don't get stuck by the shiny object of new technology, and instead they look and they say, look, we want to we want to find a way to solve these goals, and then once they're aligned on those pain points and the associated ideal business outcomes, then they can look at what's the right technology to be able to get them there. So I don't think it's an AI strategy as much as it's a business problem strategy. But I would tell you that every credit union I talk to, John, with your really good example of auto, is trying to find a way to do more loans. Like everyone is
sure,
more assets on hand today than they anticipated. They did a lot of prep for loan losses that haven't happened, and they have a lot of assets on hand. They're trying to find a way to get those dollars out, and there are great great tools out there to try that. So yeah.
But when you were sort of moving spots, we talked about that. I said, I resonate with organizations that would tell you that they don't have a technology strategy, because it is their business strategy. It's one and the same, and that's not two different things. And the technology really is just a support for the business strategy, to your point. And when you put that technology strategy first, sometimes modernization, those sorts of things, though they're important, become the focus as opposed to the health and of the business and the membership and how that grows. Anyways, let's get to Kat's question here.
Yeah, to summarize what I saw from Kat is, and Kat, feel free to unmute, but it's that kind of, and I suspect it's going to be more speculation than hard data that came out of the study. But when we talk about readiness, how much of the challenge do you sense is from the board of directors as opposed to the actual on-site management team? I mean, we often hear these stories that you've got, somewhat more seasoned folks on the board that don't necessarily equip themselves to use the technology as it stands today, and therefore may not see as much of a need for it. So I'm wondering, I'm guessing that the respondents were the frontline management or the executive management. They may be hamstrung themselves in terms of their ability to actually push some of this forward.
Yeah, I think it wasn't. We didn't go to the board with the question, so I don't think they know about it, or they wouldn't have been associated in this study. But I do think your question around, is the board enabling or is the board hindering, I think is a diminishing problem over time. I think it has historically been a real challenge to get the commitment to make the investment to be able to do those changes, because there was a sense of do we really need this, and boy, that's a lot of money, and what are we about? But I think that's all really starting to change. So I would say maybe there are some smaller legacy organizations, but even those, when I think back to conferences from 14 years ago, we were having conversations with boards of directors about these things. Today, those conversations, I think, are few and far between. And if anything, I think what I've heard from boards is they seem pretty open, and they're saying, like, look, you guys are the leadership team. You lay out the plan. Show me how you're going to guide us forward. I actually think there's an interesting challenge probably right underneath the board in some cases, and it's not a technical problem. It's a problem around real strong, really very, very clear a framework of the strategy in terms of where the organization needs to go. Because once you get that right, then everything else can kind of hinge off of that. But there oftentimes isn't a tightness to that vision. And once there is that tightness, then you can bring in digital to be able to support that. And it's also hard to get alignment. Like there's different leadership styles or different methods about bringing people together. When someone says they're going to hit a goal in a certain time frame and they don't, is it okay to call that person out? Is it, and those are, I think there's a leadership style that affects all that. And I think that there's a big opportunity to be able to get really, really clear on the goals and objectives of the organization and drive towards that. I think that when I think of the larger credit unions, I think that they have that pretty well down. So like when I meet with those institutions, they tend to be very clear on, hey, we have to hustle because we need to meet these goals. The credit unions, I see that kind of are struggle a little bit more, don't have that clarity. And that as a result, there's not that accountability.
Got it. So Craig, I have something you said just sort of clicked in with me. I have an interesting idea to ask you about. So, when you talked about loans earlier, and I was the one that sort of seeded that question by asking, the using AI for the different pieces. But I wonder if there's not something in the digital maturity index around collaboration that's really important to the credit union space, that maybe is something you could add, because I find, like, for example, that could be the magic pill. I know I've said it, probably beaten it to death on this program, but the idea that the loan issue that you were just mentioning, yes, there are organizations that have high liquidity, and then there are organizations that are flush with loans and not enough liquidity to deal with it. It seems like using like blockchain technology or something like that to sort of support that. It just feels to me that the modernization of the collaborative technology, for example, shared branching in the 80s and 90s and on, before it sort of withered as it did, because it fell under its own weight to some extent. I mean, it's still out there, it's still doing its thing, but in my mind, it could use some modernization to the point where it could get to the loans. Is there something there, you think?
Well, so we were just here at the conference, and Kyle, the vice chairman of the NCUA, was talking about the different uses of blockchain, and he made a really good point about saying the people keep thinking about blockchain and they keep thinking Bitcoin, and then they think it's a risky asset that goes up and down, and they're not sure about it. He took a step back from that. He said, what's really fundamental is the idea of this decentralized framework to be able to track and measure transactions and
or assets.
Yeah, and the blockchain thing. They've talked about a credit union, I think in Idaho, that is 100% based on blockchain. Like they don't even want to take a board vote unless it's on blockchain. So they're so committed to it.
I like that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But I think collaboration is a pretty big deal. What I see these guys do a lot of is it's getting people aligned on that vision, even collaboration, like to get to the point where you're clear and you can use technology to automate something, you have to be really clear on the ideal business outcome. So I think that fits in just the same way. And it comes, I continue to think all this stuff comes back to good leadership, and a good team that is very clear on where they want to go is going to get a lot further down the road than a team that is kind of loose in terms of their vision, in terms of where they want to move forward to.
So just, I'd love to hear from some other folks, but she did ask, oh, here's Joe. But before we get into that, how many respondents did you have? We mentioned it earlier, but Kat missed it.
I forget exactly the exact number. I know it's a statistical significant sample size, so it's over 30, but it's somewhere between 30 and 50.
I think Joe makes a good distinction here. He says, I would add a clarity between internal collaboration versus cross-CU collaboration. They both matter. And I absolutely agree. And I'm actually talking about cross-CU collaboration with the blockchain, which is what you were mentioning. I use that as just an idea. I mean, you don't need the blockchain. I mean, it's been happening for years. Look at PSCU, look at all of the, the massive, but I guess where I'm getting at is, okay, Craig, so I'm going to throw my big question at you. Okay. All right, so get ready. And so the world, if we look at how did, Elon Musk has been in the news lately. He bought Twitter, and I think he's about to buy the credit industry. He offered something like, a couple nickels or something. But anyway, so Elon, how did Elon really sort of, get in this space of SpaceX, and his big game changer was the reusable rocket, right? That was the thing. So up until now, you launch these big ships, and I say this because I got to go sit in the Blue Origin capsule this weekend, and I feel cool about it. But anyway, so you launch these big rockets, and the booster rockets, which cost bazillions of dollars, fall off and explode in the sea up until Elon gets involved, and then he sort of figures out how to land those and make them reusable. So what do you think from either a digital perspective, which is really just a business perspective? I'm in my head, I'm beginning to, not make that distinction anymore, in particular as it relates to, finance services. But what do you think the credit union, reusable rocket is? Like, what is the thing that's going to break that paradigm? Is it the AI? And if so, or is it really data insights? You mentioned that pretty heavily in your platform, which is, AI is just a tool to get to those data insights. Is it some sort of massive service mechanism that changes the paradigm? I'm just interested in what your thoughts are there.
Well, I would say, I take a step back from that question and I go, well, what is working? Like, who is killing in the financial services, and why is that working? And then everyone would say, well, the fintechs are killing it. And then you say, well, okay, why are fintechs killing it? What exactly are they doing to kill it? Well, they're really good at acquiring new customers. How are they doing that? Well, they're acquiring customers digitally with personalization at scale, and they're really good at a cost-effective way of bringing in new customers. Think of Chime, and Chime's product is number of customers. It's not really so much banking. It's how can I show growth?
Yeah, because they don't even do loans still, right? They still haven't even moved into that. They're still, DDA only.
Tons of opportunity for growth. But these guys, so they nailed that. And then if I take a step back and I go, well, and when I talk to a credit union and I say, okay, well, talk to us about your digital strategy. What are you guys up to? Well, they'll say, oh, well, we're going with Q2. And you're okay, well, so what does that mean? Well, it means that we've had all these problems with our digital banking solution before. We're coming off of one platform, we've gone shopping, we've bought another platform, that's going to solve our problem. That's not the solution to the problem. Even if you had the best Q2 implementation that there ever was, it's not going to get you over the line in terms of where you want to go as an organization, unless servicing these list members is the only priority you have, which it could be, but it comes down to growth and being very clear. You asked about Elon Musk. So Elon Musk and his other co-founder at PayPal, I think what made them so successful early on is that they were laser focused. When they were offering a ability for customers to pay for things on eBay, it was a trusted mechanism to be able to do that. They only went after the very, very highest volume customers in eBay to be able to support those transactions, the highest volume sellers. And with that, they had a really clear, defined problem. We're going to stand for this. We're going to solve this problem, and we're going to go after that market. And they did. And once they did that, then they took a step back and said, okay, well, we've achieved that. Now, how would we expand to the next thing? I think that clarity on the business problem is a big part of it. And when I think of where credit unions are, and I say, what's going to make the difference between a credit union that's doing really well and a credit union that's not doing so well? I think it comes down to growth, because you have to replace the next generation of membership. You have to go and be relevant to the next set of consumers, and you have to build deep relationships with those people, such that as they look to continue in their financial life, you're part of that conversation. There's a lot of conversation here in Acuso about partnering in that process, and I inevitably think everybody's going to have to do that.
Well, I like your comparison. I would say yes. If there is a rocket that we send up into, we keep just destroying it. For me, I do think it's the new membership application, but I would even go a step further. I feel like with most of our growth, we do it in a way that it's like we're a tribe. We go out, we kill an elephant, we drag it back to the village, we take a few bites of it and go, hey, let's find the next elephant. As opposed to when I look at the business relationships and the opportunities within the membership, just even through a simple tool like the trades and a FICO, it seems like there's more opportunity to grow from the current membership than continuing to find new members that we only service in a half-hearted way. I think the fintechs have an advantage, and I know everybody here would say that, in that one of the big challenges we have is the breadth of services that we're trying to put out there, and they are not necessarily aligned in a way. To me, it feels more like a Microsoft Office type platform. Like a spreadsheet is not a PowerPoint, and a PowerPoint is not a Word platform. They do have some similarities, just as a mortgage isn't a car loan, and a credit card isn't a debit card. And so I think when the fintechs pick off those particular things, that's for sure where they get to be laser focused, and they don't have the tail wagging the dog, in the sense that they have all this they're dragging behind them. And so it feels like, if I'm a credit union, I know it feels like that's stacked against them, because they're trying to sort of plan for this new membership but maintain the current membership. It's like they got to build two boats. And there will be those that succeed in that, and there are those that are already succeeding in that. And it could be that they don't need to build two boats. That's another thing. That could just be perception. But I like your point on that. I think the membership one, and particularly if it could be designed in a way, because that's where co-ops win, right? The problem with the co-op is almost every co-op is you got 20% carrying 80%, right? When we look at really engaged members, we're going to find that 20% of the membership are the ones carrying the place, and the other 80% have a CD or something, and they're sort of taking advantage of the co-op mentality. To the extent that you could get that flipped around and somehow engage, then the value of the co-op becomes what it was intended to be, which is everybody participating. So I do think that happens in the onboarding process. So I like your thought on that. I really do. I think that was a very astute way to look at it.
Doesn't that kind of, the chart that we have up here now, Craig, doesn't that, the fact that we're the lowest on personas and journey maps, doesn't that kind of speak to that we're not doing?
I think it does, yeah.
Yeah, honestly, I hadn't thought of it that way, but I do think that's right. I mean, I think that that's one of the areas we spend a lot of time in the consulting work we do with credit unions, digging into who are they trying to influence and what do you want them to achieve. And I think there is potential that that's true. I did want to mention too, John. You talked about the individual products that kind of in another institution can offer. And there was this, I think, the last decade of seeing this great kind of unbundling of a financial institution.
The great unbundling, I like that.
Yeah, but if you look at what's happened, is like all these companies, they took off and they picked off individual business problems. They said, Betterment said, we're going to be great at robo advising. We're going to do that little piece.
Right.
And then all of a sudden there's, small organizations that are picking off, payment transfers like Venmo. And so slowly it's kind of decaying what was the traditional, kind of full suite of banking services you could get. But I do think that what we're seeing is this rebundling. So you look at SoFi, who all of a sudden is saying, hey, actually, we're going to try and do all these things and bring them back together. So in a weird way, you've kind of gotten way out in terms of the distribution of fintech, and then now you've got some fintechs that are coming back in. But when I think of the opportunity, though, is like the secret sauce of a credit union is that you're delighting the member and you're in it for the member. And if there's some way to deliver that digitally where the member is feeling like, wow, like just the same way they would engage with a modern fintech digital experience and feel like, wow, that was a really delightful experience. If we could do that same delightful digital experience, but then have the common thread of it people helping people throughout that, that's pretty transformative. I think that would go a long way. So instead of credit unions just trying to get bigger to be bigger, maybe getting bigger because it offers them the opportunity to deliver more of this great value proposition of people helping people to even more people. And obviously journeys and personas fit into that.
Yeah, I think you said journeyization, which was a word I hadn't heard before, but at first I thought that was where everybody sings Don't Stop Believing or something. But where I think it ends up is how do you get strategically bigger? I think that's kind of what you're saying, is not bigger for bigger's sake, which is where, hey, we're going to triple our assets. Well, that's not hard. Hey, I'll just offer a CD for, X, and we'll definitely do that. But strategically bigger is, I think, we will have 40% more engaged members instead of the 20. And we've defined what that engagement is, and we've defined what the tools are. And then on top of that, we've defined what the AI strategies are to get us there. Yeah. That's kind of what we've been focusing on here in our thinking, is we see it sort of as an inside out process.
I would agree with that. I would agree that if you could, we talk about all this technology. So the third item on the left column there is modern technology. So AI, API, cloud. If you got those things perfectly, have you really won? Have you nailed your reason to engage credit union? No. But if you somehow were able to use those things to have a massive impact in terms of your ability to delight membership, well, that's really substantive, right? I mean, so if you could double assets, you can go from 1 million to 2 billion or 5 billion to 10 billion. But if you could do a commensurate amount of growth, but at the same time, really making sure your members are delighted, and it has to be done digitally because that's the way they're going to want to be dealt with. That represents a really big opportunity. But it's hard. I mean, our technology for the last couple decades, we're behind, right? So we're operating with a different kind of set of tech than other industries. And when I see credit unions try to go and buy those same tech stacks, a lot of times they're, if they just try and go and buy the raw ingredients for the platform to be able to support that, it's really hard for them to get those things right. And so it's well, I think, yeah.
Yeah, we lived that at Westcom when I was there. I mean, we were selling our tech stack, our home banking, all of those things, and people would sort of buy into it to get that success that Westcom had. And when they didn't, they'd be frustrated, or they might think, hey, and that's where I sort of immediately figured it out that, hey, it's not about, like you mentioned it earlier, the grass isn't greener always somewhere else. As a matter of fact, that decision to move to another platform, to go shopping, as you put it, will put you back a year at least. And by the way, when they first thought about it, it was like this, right? When they last thought about what the home banking platform was. But in the meantime, while they've been on that platform, it's grown to this. So the thinking for the conversion is also, far more detailed, and that is a big decision to put you behind. And I'm not necessarily saying that one product isn't better than the other. I actually think it's more nuanced than that. I think that one product may be better for this particular institution if they understand their strategy than this product is for their strategy, depending on what you're doing. So, and a great example is commercial, right? And I'd love to hear your thought on that. Did commercial factor into any of this at all?
No. We're 100% focused on the traditional credit union experience. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think you're nailing it, John, in terms of the strategy being so important. So we see a credit union get to a point where they say, look, we have a problem with online banking, for example. So we need to change that. And then they have to then come to consensus on that as a problem. That's going to take sometimes a year. Then they need to budget for that project, which could take maybe another bit of time. Then they need to issue an RFP. And then they need to go shopping for it. And then they need to get responses. And so all of a sudden, you're 2 years in. And then you're going to need to select somebody and go through contract for 6 more months. Now you need to then buy the platform. Then the vendor has to have availability, another maybe 3 to 6 months. So you're a few years in. And the problem that you set out to solve, oftentimes nobody even remembers it.
Well, not only that, but sometimes it resolves itself, like with new rules. Like, for example, how many people really went down chasing wet signatures? And DocuSign just sort of magically sort of integrated itself. That definitely falls into the category of sort of revolutionary and evolutionary technology. It just sort of appeared and people started using it, and the laws changed and things worked, but that I've seen whole organizations going after that problem, way back in the day of, well, we got to figure out how this wet signature problems are big bottleneck, only to have it sort of fix itself along the way.
Yeah,
I was going to ask, this is Joe from Visions. I was going to ask kind of a twofold question. You talked about kind of the rebundling and unbundling, and it's a topic that's come up both at large institutions, smaller institutions of is fragmentation a good thing or bad thing? And I think fintechs nailed the narrow focus, and that's what helps them win in the short run of acquiring additional customers. I think credit unions are uniquely successful because we've had a limited scope of products we can always offer. So we have a natural narrowing. But I was really going to ask, through all the kind of fin analytics that you do, is it helping people understand what their problem or their goals really should be? Because as I'm talking to many credit unions, particularly in the digital asset space, it's always we need to do something, but they don't even know why they need to do something. And it's always like, I am always like, okay, well, did you look at your data and understand what your members are even doing? Then let's talk about what solution you need to look at first. So is there a helpful tool inside of what you guys are doing that's helping, I would say, the senior leaders digest that, what really is the problem? Because that's why I see everybody's like, well, growth is an obvious answer to all problems in the credit union space, but what does that mean?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, Joe. So we in the inception process of a Finalytics new client, we're going through and defining what the ideal business outcome is. So we're looking to say, look, where are you as an organization? Where are you trying to go? What are the key business metrics you're going to use at the end of this period that you need to demonstrate you've made progress on? And from there, then we're going into the digital experience and laying out a strategy to be able to improve that, and then deploying AI and machine learning to monitor a user's behavior as they navigate through the experience to then prioritize what they're looking for. So if you have a member that keeps coming back to looking at auto loans, when they come back to the experience, we want to promote auto loans. If they get an auto loan and now that's a product that they have, we don't want to keep promoting auto. We want to go to the next logical product. And so we're just taking the digital experience and we're applying your strategy as a credit union, and then we're combining that with then actual user behavior to then guide them to the right place. And so I think those two pieces have to fit together. And sometimes that's kind of rough. I mean, sitting down and having conversations with people that aren't clear on where they want to go, sometimes that's a tough conversation where we're pushing someone to make decisions that maybe they're not comfortable with. Maybe that's not their management style. Sometimes, you've got leaders that are more hoping to generate consensus, but not be the lead. They don't want to set that. And that's hard too, because a lot of times you need a leader to come in and say, we're going to be the best in auto this year. We're going to do more mortgage than we've ever done before. And then that brings clarity to everybody. Expecting a team of silos to come together and kumbaya and agree, that oftentimes is hard too.
Yeah, it makes complete sense. And then my other question was around, obviously we're getting a massive shift kind of in data privacy and the use of data, particularly as it comes to marketing and the use of that data to personalize an experience. What are you guys doing in that space, and is synthetic data kind of playing in that role of helping people shift? And maybe this is way too advanced for what credit unions are facing today, but for sure I'm considering it and think of it. California obviously playing a big piece of it.
We intentionally built our platform to navigate around that. So we're not storing any PII. We're not even using cookies because we're using the local storage on the browser for one little bit of information, but otherwise that's about it on our site. So we've built our platform to be able to navigate around that way. So I think it'll continue to be a problem. Yeah, absolutely. But I think it'll be always, we're going to a world where we're not going to have anonymous digital experiences. The experiences will be informed by what you've done in the past, and the advantage to doing that will outweigh the loss of privacy in certain circumstances, and in other circumstances not. So it's just like my Yahoo in 1995, people were willing to give up some information so they didn't have to enter in all their stock tickers at every time they logged in. So I think that's going to be the exchange of value.
Anybody else have questions? These have been great. Craig, thanks so much for joining us. Anybody else want to pop in? So while we're waiting, we only have 8 minutes left. And Glenn, did you have anything else you want to cover? Because I was going to ask him about engagements, but you're on mute, Glenn. I got buy you the mute button.
Sorry about that. No, the main thing that I was kind of curious about, and you've kind of covered already, Craig, is any kind of segmentation, whether there's geographic. You've said that there really isn't a big breakout by size of the credit union you explored. I mean, is there any other kind of characteristics that tend to put somebody on one side versus the other of the spectrum?
Just behavior. I mean, so we're just we're actually going to be releasing a white paper soon with a financial brand on a segmentation of one experience and how you get to it. And so we're bringing in then a series of credit unions that we have relationships with that participated in that research and putting together that report. But the idea is to get around that. So I was talking with a client recently who was saying, look, I want to segment my audiences, and I want to then manually go through and create marketing materials for each audience based on that segmentation's needs. And what we're trying to do is kind of put that on its head and say, well, actually, you don't have to worry about what segment the person's in on the digital experience. We're going to monitor that behavior, and they're going to end up in some type of segment of one that is exactly content that's relevant to who they are. And so, if you're pulling, ingesting as much information as we can on the user from a behavioral perspective, from ideally from an account perspective, to understand what they do and don't have with you, from a transactions perspective, using all those insights to then inform based on this individual user, here's the right content for them based on what they're trying to achieve. And just listening, I actually, so we get so far down the road in trying to, think through all these permutations of strategies to drive better outcomes. And, we're probably guilty to it as a tech company because we get really excited about the technology. But if you take a step back from it a little bit and just say, wait a second, fundamentally, the website in most credit unions hasn't changed in years. And it's basically the same website that's been up for well over 12 months. And the user just needs to navigate through that. So just the fact that we're caring about that and we're looking at data and we're trying to take action on that data, we're getting closer and closer. And it'll be a slow kind of, you know, zeroing in on the target. That won't be perfect, but ultimately, you know, by caring about that and iterating on it, we're going to get better and better over time. So
that kind of leads me into a question, Glenn, that you kind of, I think you were getting at there from the segmentation, but what are the table stakes? Like, for example, I was just working with a crane the other day where they realized that, you know, they really don't have good emails for all their members. I mean, that would seem like that's not a thing in 2022, but I have a feeling if we took a quick poll, maybe people on the call here could tell us, do they feel like they have, you know, good email for all the members? Or, you know, and then the next one would be, you know, cell phones and things like that, just contact information, which feels to me like the sort of the lowest rung of some of that information you're going to need to sort of figure out, you know, besides their behaviors, which I know you'll draw in, but, and maybe I'm way off there, but what are the table stakes? Like, are there any expectations where maybe somebody's thinking about this and they don't even have this yet? You know, what is this?
Table stakes, you have to have some type of loan digital online account origination process. So that has to be there, right? So we need to be able to draw somebody in something. And you know, the next step underneath that is we want to be able to go and edit that. We want to be able to go and take a look at that process because 99% of them are just not good. And so if we can take a you know, kind of an optimization route at looking at how to make sure that that form is more pleasant and approachable and completable for the user, those are things that we know we can do to be able to drive improved conversion. So sometimes breaking up a form or explaining why you're asking a question or asking a question in the right order, those things will have a pretty big effect in terms of completion. The ability to track that too, so the ability to drop somebody back into the funnel where, so if I completed half the form, the average person takes 2.2 visits to complete a form for application. So you've got to be able to bring them back to where they were. And so those are kind of, I think, really important table stakes in terms of you know, driving.
I would say there are a lot of cranes that don't have that. And what about A/B?
You know, we don't do the A/B testing so much because we're kind of doing it on an automated basis. So traditionally, you know,
with the synthetic data kind of.
Well, with behavioral, yeah. So whatever we're sucking in terms of who that user is, yeah. And but traditional content management systems that you know, we on a consultative basis for years have worked with credit unions putting in big CMS platforms. And the problem with that is, in theory, it's the right approach, right? You know, credit union CEO says, we're going to personalize the digital experience. We want to use tools that are going to enable our team to be able to better connect with the digital visitor. But in practice, the technical solution is so complicated that what you've really succeeded in doing is putting more technology between you and the member, which is not what you want to be doing, right? You're actually making it harder to more deeply engage. So we think that that's why we built analytics. So we don't think that that's the right approach. We think that as much as you can kind of automate those processes, the better off you are.
So I'll close with this. How do people find you? By the way, I have a whole nother really controversial thing I would have said, but let's save it for our podcast. Maybe you could jump on. I want to talk about apps, but anyway, so if people want to engage, you know, they're hearing this, they're going, this is the guy we need. Look at him, he's fancy. And by the way, you're not near as unpleasant as your picture, so that was cool. Not that your picture was unpleasant. You're not near as, that wasn't a good wording. I'm tired. It's been a long time out here in Orlando. I've been on the road a long time. But anyways, really super pleasure to meet you and have you on the show. We've talked before. But what is your, how do people engage? And they, you know, they go to the Finalytics.ai website and.
Yep, go to Finalytics.ai and we've integrated Calendly, right, as a way to book a meeting with us. And and that's our schedule. So I mean, it's about as easy as you can get.
So there, you just said that's the table stakes. You got to at least be able to use Calendly. If you can't do that, then you can't engage. There you go.
It's pretty straightforward. I mean, but it's a pretty great tool. I mean, talk about partners.
It is a great tool.
Right? Yeah. It's a pretty good system.
It's simplistic and it works. Well, listen, thanks so much. And Glenn, thank you for, I know you're not feeling well. either. So thank you for putting this together. Good luck getting home from the yacht club. If you just had a captain's hat, you'd be really on it there. I know there's one down in the lobby you could get. I've been there before. And thanks everyone for joining us. Joe, thanks for the great questions. You too, Kat. And I really like this product. I do want you to come on the podcast because what I want to talk about is I don't believe that everybody should have everything in one app. Well, no, John just said you need to have more than one app, and I can back it up. So, but I want to talk to you about it because I think it's crazy to try to make everything one experience in one app, but that's just me. So, all right, we'll chat about it. And Glenn, maybe you can work him into the podcast at some point. I think it'd be awesome to go over this there as well.
I'm on it. Thanks.
All right. Sounds good, guys. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.